second week of the unified Metamodel. It was rather interesting. We had all sorts of discussions on our fundamentals this week, where lots of people, different people were, one person even asked, they're not sure of the value of metadata. And I thought, wow, Veronica and I actually discussed it quite a lot when we went for a walk in terms of saying, how do people manage without metadata? And it was quite something to to have to spend quite a bit of time convincing people that metadata was important. So that was quite something. I suppose my view on it was that a lot of times as part of IT or application development, the move to agile and the move to all these different things are pushing deliverables, and in some cases reducing the level of metadata artifacts like data models and glossaries and things like that. And sometimes in detriment to ourselves and the project, but it's a challenge. We get pushed to work as fast as possible to deliver as much as possible, and we let things like the metadata go. You need to have big problems later on, and we sort of creep into technical debt where, as an example, we don't have the glossaries defined, we don't have the data flows defined, we don't have everything set up, and then we start implementing without it, and we start making decisions and only to have a problem later on. So it's certainly been my experience when we forget these things, when we don't pay attention to the data models. Yes, sometimes we can get it out a lot quicker, but then we start having problems when we want to extend and we want to grow the system. That's when our challenges come along. Okay, so let's continue with the unified meta model. We did a whole lot of this up front on the unified meta model essential concepts. We even spoke about ISO 11179. We spoke a little bit about standardization and harmonization, some of the challenges. And this week we are focusing on the data citizen. So I don't know if there are any specific requirements to discuss one of these. I did want to just do a quick recap on the community project that we are building, and just to show you how we've progressed. I know Paul is on the line, so I needed to just do a quick catch up with Paul to see if there was anyone else who was interested in getting involved. I know a few of you put your name down, but I wasn't sure how that had progressed. Okay, so these were the requirements for this project that we're talking about. One is, and problems I've had where I tried to do a maturity assessment. We tried to talk about a certain deliverable. I don't really have anything to show them. I don't have a template. I don't have a scorecard. I don't have a benchmark, and things can get quite sensitive or subjective in terms of saying, well, what is it level 3, 4, 5? Where are we, and are we progressing? Now, the next one we spoke about was understanding all the aspects of our data management activities, and that was really part of the data manager that we did last week, where they really need to understand everything that's happening in their data management departments, and do they have everything defined, and do they have everything integrated? Okay. And then we also spoke about education, and this is the area that I'd like to focus on now. We call it the data citizen education. Now, I'd love to get your feedback because we have several problems when we train on the data management fundamentals. And I know Caro's there. Caro's just completed a week of training where when we talk to some people, the lack of understanding of what those artifacts look like and what they are is quite hard when you work on these data management fundamentals, where you've got to get through all of the 11 knowledge areas, and you can't really show people what they look like. Now, I also know for example, Veronica, who does a lot of training, she doesn't always have experience of all the different artifacts. And so when people ask a question, what does that mean and how do you do that? It's a case of, well, how do we connect the dots? How do we show people what's actually going on? Okay. So I don't know if any of you else have found a similar problem when we don't clearly understand what those artifacts look like, making sense of the principles and the activities and that it's not that easy. Okay. So that's a challenge I have. I don't know if anyone else would like to share, if there's anyone, maybe Caro or Veronica or Paul or anyone. Are you also seeing that this is a challenge that we have, is a case of we've got all this list of deliverables, but what do they mean and how do we use them?
Yes, very definitely. I find certainly in this group, or the groups that do talk to us when we're doing the training, are always looking for examples. Like, how do we actually apply this? What does this mean?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So the example today, why would you use a poly hierarchy instead of a normal hierarchy?
Right.
You know,
right.
We're able to answer, but it'd be lovely to say, this is the example. Here's a picture.
Yes, correct. And how would you put it together?
Yeah.
Thanks, Caro. Paul, what about yourself? I know you've had lots of challenges when you do maturity assessments. I'm sure you face a similar type of thing.
100%, Howard. And in fact, tomorrow I've got a session with the client where we're doing exactly that. We're talking through the different knowledge areas and getting to an agreement, because right now it's pretty distributed, the effort within the organization, and everybody's got their idea of what needs to be done. And tomorrow's emphasis is how do we bring it all together so we can leverage off all the good work that everybody's doing.
Right.
And who's got the right examples. So that's going to be I suppose the biggest challenge. Who's doing it most right?
Yeah, who can have the best explanation of what it should look like? Yeah, agreed.
So,
okay, fantastic. So I also see Gabriel here, and Gabriel's just asked a question on, he's put forward the Agile Manifesto, valuing working software over comprehensive documentation. And yes, that's certainly a challenge. That approach that they have is about, let's get the software working, and then we'll do the most appropriate level of documentation. Now, that's always debatable in different areas as to, well, what is the most appropriate documentation? And then Gabriel goes on to ask to say, how does anyone value working data more than comprehensive data documentation? And I suppose the simple answer to that, and Veronica and I were talking about it, is sometimes in development shops and areas, we can get caught up in paralysis of analysis, and then the business get tired of this thing and say, just get something done, just get it working, go and get something done. The fact that we start having challenges down the road, that's not the current situation. It's about getting it done now and showing people that there's some value to it. And we all sit under that. I don't think there's any one of us who don't have the challenge of delivery. Deliver, and next week you got to deliver some more. Gabriel, I think there was the next question in terms of what does it mean that data works versus comprehensively documented. Can I just understand that question a little bit more?
It's a play of words. They say working software.
Oh, right.
So in the realm of data, working data. So in our world, how do you define working data? To apply the approach of the Agile Manifesto. Agile data, this, Agile data. Well, what does it mean, working data? If we define that, at least we have a bridgehead.
Yeah. So we need
it's
more.
It's rhetorical. Look, I don't want to distract you from what you want to present.
No. I think it's this whole thing of working data would also, if you don't define it properly, as you said, if I don't understand that data, it's not working for me. It may be working for you, but it's probably not working for me. And I've seen those situations as well where we get data sets and data scientists spend a whole lot of time trying to get it to work, and then it doesn't work for them. The numbers don't make sense. They can't aggregate it. They can't get the decisions out of it. So is that not working data? All right. So this is what we'd like to do is to focus on this data citizen education. What we are saying is a lot of the times we cannot teach them the whole DMBOK when they don't have these fundamentals. If they don't have the fundamentals and they a business data steward or something like that, trying to go through the DMBOK with them is I think it's like torture. It's not easy for them. Okay, so I just wanted to take you through this. We've seen what it is, but we've started to make some progress. So, example, Paul is working on the DG template library. I'm working on the DQ template library, and Veronica's working on the DII template library. Now, just to take you in there quickly to show you what we're trying to do is two things. One is the first thing when I look at this, and I must admit, I was quite embarrassed when I looked at it, and I knew every single one, but I had never done a data access agreement. I'd never done it before. I've never built a data access agreement. I've built data sharing agreements. And then I thought, well, is it the same as a data sharing agreement? And we were fortunate to have a data privacy discussion yesterday. And I explained this data access agreement to Caroline Mouton, and she said, that's very similar to a data protection agreement. Okay, so this is what I find amazing when we look at these deliverables, and it's like, well, what does that actually mean? And I must admit, when I did a Control F in my DMBOK to find a data access agreement, I couldn't find it, which was another challenge. Okay, so here are the DMBOK deliverables for DII. And these are the deliverables that we added because we couldn't find them. As an example, most of the DII is having a business definition of what is the data latency requirement. Okay, so how many of you have put together a definition or asked the business about their data latency requirements? I'd love to hear anyone put their hand up in terms of that. And then we have a data migration product that is there as well. We've got data transformation rules. We all know that when you do ETL, whatever it is, the business have got to help us define the rules. And then the two obvious ones in terms of DII is our data lineage and our data impact analysis, and that's what we refer to as our operational metadata. Okay, so we need that metadata store. That's critical. Okay, not in the DMBOK deliverables. So that's something we need to complement. Now, this is the technique that I use in terms of where's my progress. I go from red to green, and you can see the strike through is the stuff that I've done, and the others haven't been completed at the moment. Okay, so these are all the ones that we're working on currently. And here's my list of DII artifacts. Now, so what I did do was I just tried to, what we're trying to do is as we build the template, we have to build examples so we can show somebody, like Caro said, people want to see how this data exchange will work. This is what the data exchange architecture looks like. These are some of the definitions. Okay, notice another ISO definition on the data exchange protocol. Okay, there is the template that I've delivered for data exchange. So we've got the ID, we've got the fully qualified attribute, the entity, the attribute name, the type and value, and then these are sample values of how we would translate our elements. Okay, now we have a data service. And again, it's a case of, initially it was, well, what do we mean by a data service? And here are some examples just with the description. And here are some data services that I've put together in the artifact with the appropriate metadata documentation and the URI and what subject it's in. So again, quite a bit of detail to talk about. And then we have a data access agreement. And this is where I spend time trying to understand, well, what is the data access agreement? And these are the essential parts of it. And then this was just a nice differentiation between a sharing agreement and an access agreement. So the access about the terms under which users are provided access to the specified data. And the nice thing about that is if we are asking our data citizens to handle data sharing and data access, remember those are data access elements, they need to understand the difference between these two. Okay, so that was a helpful discussion. Right, then data latency. And data latency was quite an interesting one because, yes, data latency does relate to the timeliness DQ dimension. Okay, so is it okay just to do the timeliness dimension? Is that okay? And I'll show you. I'll just go through this one quickly before we get there. And there is an example of timeliness. So if I was to do a DQ expectation of timeliness, I'd basically say to the data steward, okay, what's your expectation of the availability? So when the data comes into the application, when is it going to be on the report? And then they got these other ones of manual float and electronic float. And I thought, okay, that's quite nice, but what happens if the person says, well, I need it instantaneously? Okay, as soon as the event happens, I need it on my report. Okay, now this is not going to give me enough information to have the debate and the discussion with it, because it's going to go from a high latency to a very low latency. So do I go all the way to streaming or Lambda architecture to achieve this data quality expectation? So what I did do was I spent a little bit of time just defining how it's measured. Okay, what is the required latency? What are the different areas? And then I actually said, well, what value is added to us for lower latency? Because we're trying to understand that. If you want me to go faster, then what is the benefit to me? What is the benefit to you? And here was a nice example of NASA. They've got certain latency requirements. And these are the different areas. Now, what was interesting when I looked at some of this stuff, now some of the stuff only comes about 1 week later. Okay, so that's the way it works. So it's a nice way of being able to take all your different products that you're delivering. When is the data going to be available, and what is your latency around that? And then there was a nice categorization. So if I was to ask this user, okay, tell me why you want it faster. Are we going to improve forecasting or model simulation? Are we going to get early warning, improve decision making? And that was really helpful to have a set of criteria that I can use to measure the data latency requirements as defined by the data steward. So that's also very helpful. Okay. And then if we understand, well, who's the audience? So if I have 20 people asking, where are we sitting and what sort of requirements are we coming up with? Okay, then I found this one to be very interesting. This was an assessment by Google, and it was a document they wrote up on the Gospel of Speed in 2012, and they revealed that a 400 millisecond delay caused a 0.44% drop in search volume. Okay. So this is the situation they have. And then Amazon came and quantified that a little bit more to say that every 100 milliseconds of latency costs 1% in sales. Okay, now that's the information you need to make these decisions about, well, how quick do we actually need the data? Okay. And what I liked was I then managed to find some questions that we can put forward to our business users to say, how would you characterize your use? For what purposes? For the purposes of your work? How timely are the data requirements needed? How often do you need the data frequency? Will more rapid delivery benefit you if we produce it faster rather than accuracy? So can you see this one? Who can remind me of the Deming point that he made about accuracy and speed? Okay, so here is the actual question of, if I get it faster, it's possible that I reduce the accuracy. Remember, NASA was saying some products are only available a week later. So if they were going to give it to you 3 days later, then what's the accuracy cutoff that we have? Okay, so very nice, this document. And maybe just for me to pause, is there any questions, and has anyone spent any time like this discussing this thing with their users? Because I found it so often when I'm doing the training, people come to me and they said their business people want all of the marketing data, all the internet data as quickly as possible. So please, can you build an infrastructure? Now, when they start looking at the infrastructure, it costs a lot of money. And they're not sure how to have that discussion. Anyone have a similar problem or any observations?
Yeah, everybody
Yes,
wants it
of
now,
course,
Howard.
Mark,
Everybody
you
wants it
asking me.
fast. Everybody's the hero of their own story.
Yeah.
And a skillful BA data architect will push back. Well, what does that mean? Well, why is that? You know, the 5 whys. You can. And some things do need to be extremely low latency. We're running a mine and we're tracking the haul trucks in real time. If we need to know that they're following too close, we need the data right now. We don't want to send them a report card a month from now saying, hey, you were following that other truck too close. We want to be able to send him a message to his operator console and say, slow down a bit. It's a safety issue.
And whenever you get into human lives and safety, then all of a sudden that latency reduces tremendously. But there's a good business requirement. And I think from our side, it's all about being able to capture and document those requirements. And then there's, in some cases, if you get them documented, then there's less of a thing of, well, I don't really believe you, or maybe you don't really need it, which comes in I find it very helpful to have a survey that we do, and we can ask those different questions. Okay. The other one that I've used, which is called Operational BI, and I used this in a pharmaceutical distribution company where they were picking products off their shelves, and in some cases the product wasn't available. So when the picker was walking and doing the picking, it would come back to say, I don't have any panados, or what's the American headache tablet?
Oh, Tylenol?
Yeah, Tylenol. That's right. So then it would be a case of, well, maybe this deliverable shouldn't go out because it's got this core element that it's missing. And so we built this operational BI system, and we had to measure all of these latencies that we developed in slowing down the business process. So we got all the events on TIBCO ESB. We would check to see what it was, and then if we had volumes that weren't coming through, and then we broke it up into the latency of the data, the analysis, how long it took to get the data into the warehouse, then the decision, and then what happens if that action was initiated and they sent the bus out or they sent the truck out, and then what actually completed on that. So we were able to sort of break it down into these type of discussions, and then we could assess the value, the loss of value with our operational BI. And I also like this explanation as well, in terms of we can't always deal with latency and ignore bandwidth. So it depends on the type of data that we're getting. And there you can see almost what Mark was talking about, autonomous driving, or sometimes on the mines, those CAT machines are actually driven and controlled centrally. So these different delays, this is where your different delays come about. So just again, helpful to have those examples and to be able to present the different areas. Okay. All right. So this is where we are with the different templates. And what I wanted to go through now is go back to the data citizen and look at, why does the data citizen need these set of templates? What do they benefit from it? And we're already starting to bring some of those discussions out. The first one is our ability to train our data stewards. Okay, so give them some practical examples of what these artifacts look like and what they need to be able to produce. And then also to create some training where they have a case study on creating the artifacts and consuming output. So if they need to build an artifact that's dependent on a data strategy, do they know how to read a data strategy? Another example of if you're building a data strategy, you need to relate that to your business strategy and your business capability model. Now, if you've never seen it, well, how am I going to do this? How am I going to create these different artifacts how am I going to consume the outputs so that I can create my artifacts? So again, a lot of benefits in doing that. And then the next one that we have to talk about is the automation. So a lot of the times we need to automate our data management because Excel is not going to work. We can't live in Excel land for too long. We can do it initially whilst we're ironing out our procedures, but we've got to get into a comprehensive tool. And before we get the tool, we should be going into some form of reference architecture definition. So those are the three areas that I believe our data stewards need some help in. Okay. So if we come back to our data stewards and what they need to do on a daily basis, first of all, they need to manage what I refer to as operational data management or first line of defense. That is, they would be checking up and making sure that when we produce data, either by adding information to an application or by importing data, sourcing data and importing it, that we're doing it properly. And the other one is consuming data. So that would be on the report. So when we read the data or when we analyze the data, they would pick up, we got quality problems here. Our BI reports are not balancing. So that's what I refer to as operational data management. But then we've also got, as part of a data project, we've got this approach of where they have to define data. Okay, so we produce data, consume data, and then we define data. Those are some of the roles that we have on our data stewards. And they may need to supply inputs. They need to be able to consume outputs. So sometimes we build a data product in a BI report or a data mart. We produce it for the data stewards, and they need to be able to consume it. They need to understand what they're given and work with it. And then the other situation is they actually need to be able to create certain artifacts. For example, a data sharing agreement. They need to create a business glossary. There's a whole lot of a data access element. They need to be able to create it. And so many times when I do the data management training and I talk to the people, most of them say, well, most of the data governance people say, well, they're doing the sharing agreements. They're doing all the access control. They're doing the business glossary. And that's not a good position to be in either. Okay, data governance people can't take on all the data steward work. They've got to be able to hand it over. Okay, now this handing over is not easy. The first thing is going to say, well, why should I do it? It's your problem. You created the system. You're doing it. Now you fix it. You're the one who should be doing it. And that's another challenge where we have to go through, but saying, well, that's not really true. You created the data, you added it in, and you're the ones who understand the data better than what we do. Okay, so typically what we do in organizational change management, now no Caro's on there, and I was keen to get her feedback. This is what we refer to as a resistance plan. Anyone worked with a resistance plan? And what you do on a resistance plan is you actually listen for certain words in terms of how people resist what you're asking them to do. And so we've got a whole lot of different possible negative responses. I can't do it. I shouldn't do it. You should do it. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't do it, and I won't do it. Okay. Now, what I like to do is again, I make use of ADCAR. Maybe I'm that's about the only thing I know, but I make use of ADCAR, And then to be able to explain, if we're talking about somebody telling us that we shouldn't do it or they shouldn't do it, then I need to be able to address this issue of awareness. Well, why do you need to do it? Why do you need to do it and not me? And then the next one is they could say, I wouldn't do it. And then we have to be able to demonstrate to them why you're more appropriate. Okay, so why is a data steward more appropriate? Why is a business data steward more appropriate than a technical data steward? And that's giving it the desire. So what's in it for me? What do I benefit if I do this work? Okay, and then we will train. If they say I can't do it, then we have to train and enable, and that's all part of this knowledge, ability, reinforcement. That's how we deal with that issue. And then if they say they won't do it, which is the hardest one, then we have to be able to say, okay, if you won't do it and you don't want to change, then we have to find an alternative work for you to do. And I always like, forget the guy's name, good to great, Peter, no, sorry. Then it's first of all, what they say is, first of all, get the who and then the what. Okay. All right. Now, the last one, and this was a bit of a surprise in terms of saying, I couldn't do it. Does anyone know how we would deal with people? Jim Collins, thanks, Paul. And that talks about get the right people onto the bus in the right seats and get the wrong people off the bus. I wonder if you remember that's the sort of thing. And then once you've got the people on the bus in the right seats, then you start driving the bus and you start delivering. Okay. But we have to get this right first. We have to get our operating model sorted out and we have to get these people out. But that was a bit of a jump around. So if I say I couldn't and we will remove the obstacles, how does data governance deal with this? Any ideas? Caro, maybe you can deal with it from organizational change. Any ideas?
So the couldn't, I would actually look at it from the point of view of change being systemic. So you don't just change one component of it. You need to change all of the elements that actually have a relationship around it. So I would actually want to know why can't this person do it? Is there something tangible which is preventing them that we could do something about? Whether it be maybe they're not being rewarded for that. Their performance management is something else, or is it that they don't have the skills, or they don't have the ability, or what is it?
Okay,
but I think it might be broader than just one person.
Right, and so there's a technique that we should be using in our data governance to deal with this issue. Crystalline, I see your hand up. Is there a suggestion from you?
Howard, I'm actually keen to hear what you say, and then I'll give my feedback. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, fantastic. Mr. Bolton, what this should be close to your heart. What would you suggest we do here?
Bring out the shotguns first. Thumbs up from someone. Yeah. So I think I'm probably leaning off that ADCAR that you always talk of, that awareness, creating awareness and desire. So start a series of bringing some information to the table to show the value and the benefit of it. Getting those questions and then start to produce the artifacts to show how to actually implement and build a team. Yeah.
All right. So what the answer that we should be doing to be proactive around this is what I refer to as basically our SIPOC after action report. So all data governance people, remember, we're responsible for defining principles, policies, and procedures. And then we're asking our data citizen to do some work. And then we have a review at the end and they say, I couldn't do it. I couldn't provide this information. I couldn't get this. I couldn't do that. And the outcome of the process was a failure, or it didn't work as effectively as it should work. Okay. Now, this is what we build is we define the procedure, you define the scorecard, and then you define a retro or an after action report. That's what Agile does very well, is they have those retros And that was also part of data quality, where they say, well, what was supposed to happen, what actually happened, what can we learn from this, and why was there a difference? And that's how we have to keep on revising our data governance procedures for every single area that we work on. So, Crystalline.
Yes. Sorry, question here, and I don't know if my response is appropriate or not. When we do define the policies, procedures, and we put in a operating model, and as part of the operating model, these roles and responsibilities are assigned to the data steward or the data owner who can make decisions or, to go back and define certain data assets. And they come back to you and they say, sorry, they can't do it. Or after they've had adequate training, they say they don't have capacity. How do you handle in that scenarios?
Oh, yeah. So certainly that would come back, as Paul was saying, is if they're coming back and say, well, they didn't even attempt it, so there was nothing really wrong with the procedure, they just didn't have the desire. I tend to see that as a desire issue. If they're not failing in this, and we must also know, have we been able to take them, give them training, make sure they've got the ability? And Mark Nolte did a great comment there. I like Mark Nolte's one, is basically when you get them to ride the truck. So the first time we lead, the second time we watch them doing it, and the third time they must do it on their own, and then we review. Okay, so this is sort of what we're doing in the knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. Okay. All right. So yes, we would then say, well, okay, you've gone through that. It's not as if you lack the ability. You're not saying that I can't. Okay, you're basically saying I couldn't achieve the outcome, and we would have to go and look at, well, is our process there? I don't know. Okay, so that's to me the way I try to deal with it. I couldn't. Crystalline, does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks, it does.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so these are the elements. So we have to know that we have to give them the right training, make sure they are capable of doing it. And that's where we talk about this ability. Can they complete the Excel? Can they achieve what we need to do? Okay. Now, what I wanted to talk to you about was Tim Collins, or Jim Collins, was also created something. He invented a thing called the flywheel. And he spoke about this process of having to turn the wheel just one little notch at a time until you can turn it, and then after a while it spins on its own, and you get this momentum uptake of people doing things and getting the right answers. And this was Amazon's flywheel. Basically, they lowering the cost for the customers, which increases the number of customers, which attracts more third parties to sell, which leads to more revenue, which helps lower the cost for the customer. So they get that cyclic benefit. And we're looking for something like this on our data stewards. Okay, so if we're doing the training, what are we looking at from a data governance point of view? Okay, so this is how I see it in terms of the data steward flywheel. And we're talking about the who. We need to be able to teach them how to produce a deliverable as quickly as possible. Okay, they shouldn't have to go on a 4 or 5 day training session. I think it's helpful in certain areas, but if they just need to learn how to do a data access agreement, please, I need to create a data access agreement. Well, we need to be able to give them that training, which then improves our data management capabilities. So now we're getting into a situation where people are delivering the artifacts, which then lowers the resistance, which increases business ownership. And this is where I see our flywheel coming in, where the quicker we can get them competent, the better our capabilities are going to be. And then we're going to have less resistance and more ownership. Okay. And we'll spin around that. And it's important that this is also, some people refer to it as the data strategy flywheel, where if they get more data, they can learn more in terms of insights and machine learning that gives them better business functions, that gives them more customers. And so that's the flywheel on a data strategy. What I was missing was this flywheel on how do we get our data stewards going and keep them going. Now, of course, we want to create those communities of practice around them, and they will be able to give the tips and tricks on each one of these procedures that we develop. So that is certainly an area that we'll keep on working on, but it's that quick learning. How do we get to a point where they can quickly produce a deliverable, whichever one we have? And please, it's not just producing, it's also supplying inputs or reading the things, whatever it is, they need to be able to do that. Now, this was part of a course that we're putting together for our data stewards, and they can come in anywhere on this course and to be able to understand what it is that they need to do. So, of course, they need to understand metadata management. This is almost something that is the fundamental. And then they would need to be able to understand data valuation, data modeling, data quality, parsing, matching, and deduping, removing the duplicates, classifying, curating, and cataloging data, and then our controlled vocabularies. And this is the scope that I see of the manner in which our data stewards have to perform their work in the organization. Okay, now there's some really interesting things here in terms of being able to teach them how to understand and model the data in NoSQL, no relational. So how would they create a model of a JSON document, or how would they understand what's going on there? Okay. So just to pause there, are any questions, any comments on the type of training that we need to be providing our data stewards? And of course, what we're trying to do is have templates in the background so they can go and have a look at a DMMA. They can go and have a look at a change strategy, a use case portfolio, a data strategy, the different schemas, subject area models. This is what we're trying to bring in the background. Okay. Any comments, questions? Can you go back to the flywheel? Sure. This one over here.
Yeah, this one over here. The problem with being in the office is people tap you on the shoulder and talk to you, and you look away, and then you've moved on. And so it's good and bad, right? So thank you very kindly. I understand. That's perfect.
Yeah. So this is important, that the quicker we can get our data stewards to be able to produce the deliverables and feel comfortable that they're not, they're battling to do the work and have that resistance, the quicker they start to take on these capabilities and get to that ownership. And it's this process of moving them from being, when we come into a lot of times before we set up a data governance program, they most of the times they are dependent on IT doing all the work. And when we bring in the data governance, then all of a sudden it's about converting them to be more involved and doing more of the work that we require. All right. Okay. So then Gabriel's got a comment. It was going okay with the slide. All things that should need to be trained on. Okay. All right. So that's an interesting comment, Gabriel, in terms of saying that this is something that our stewards, not many of them do. Is that your comment, or are you saying that we probably never be able to train all of this for them?
All of the above. Like,
okay.
Like I would say, experienced data modeler.
Yeah.
And even myself, I would say, oh, well, do I know how to sort out, match and dedupe myself? If I go to data valuation, well, I don't feel like an economist, so do I know? And in practical day-to-day, if you get stewards responsible for some data assets, slivers of data, in my opinion, to do the last two, and a little bit of observation on data quality, wow, that's great. you've done well. Data modeling, isn't that for devs these days? Or not even a target for anyone anymore? There's a hashtag everywhere. Oh, data modeling is dead.
Yeah. No.
But if in practice, maybe you're talking about several types of data stewards, but here it doesn't say. Like, these are all fundamental capabilities training. True, but come on.
Okay.
In principle, in practice, sounds like a lot. If you put something in front of a group of like this, in front of a would-be group of data stewards, watch them running for the door.
Okay.
At least in my company or many others I've seen.
Okay. So I understand what you're saying, and lots of people have when there's actually a slide in the DMBOK which refer to data steward principles, and they've got data steward principles that all data needs to be modeled, all data needs to be cleaned at source, all data needs to be defined, and there's that requirement. Now, what I'd like to suggest to you, Gabriel, is that they don't always have to be able to produce the document, but they need to understand the document and supply inputs and consume outputs. So in the example of a data modeling scenario, they have to be able to define the business rules and the relationships and the cardinality. They can't not get involved there, and they have to be able to contribute. Now, are they able to produce a physical data model? No, not suggesting they are. Are they able to produce all of those logical different types of models? Not suggesting they are, but they need to be involved in the process.
Okay, you have a broader definition of data steward. I probably have in mind more operational or people working in cataloging data. I agree, but I love to work with business people on data models. Perfect. But they're not data stewards.
Okay, so
kind of terminology being you teach people about stewardship, all right, but I'd say for people who are going to be officially given roles of data stewards, that's why I'm saying maybe this is many of them will not do that. In general, business people engaged in data projects together with techies, sure, the training that they need. If they're contributing to modeling, great, they need to understand the modeling techniques. If they are there to help with data quality, yeah. But data steward to me is like a specific role given to someone for a period of time in respect of some assets. So what would they actually do to manage those assets, steward the assets, curate?
Yeah, I think what you're referring to are those almost that operational data management, and I'm actually referring to a situation of there's also those that are involved in data projects.
Agreed.
Okay, so I've actually had that experience in the central bank in South Africa, where I was able to teach one of our data stewards the ability to manage the conceptual data model. And he was an SME in financial markets. And it was amazing to see the control that that man established once he was comfortable in understanding how to read a model and then to be able to bring the high level business concepts on there. Once he had got hold of that technique of building that conceptual model, anybody who came in and made any adjustments to business rules or associations between data sets and elements, they would talk to him about that data model. So I've had personal experience where in giving them that power and giving them the capability, that power that he had as an SME to understand and define how the data systems work was quite phenomenal. Okay, so what is important here is, yes, in some cases, we may not ask them to be able to produce data models or do all the actual produce the artifact itself, but they need to be able to, and again, you may have 5 different data stewards, and then you'll get some of them able to do some of the elements and others able to do other elements. but it is about the data stewards need to be able to contribute to the creation of these different areas, and they need to be able to discuss it and produce interesting things. Now, I wanted to share you as well is that here is what we refer to as the DSBOK. I don't know if any of you have seen something called the DSBOK. Okay, this was introduced by eLearning Curve. And again, I wanted to show you here, these are the things that these people are taught on. Okay, types of data models, logical, why and who and what, and then the perspectives and the modeling purpose and the different reads and writes. So here they talk about data modeling, data profiling, curation, parsing, matching. Sure. So this was a confirmation when certainly with us, when we look at where do we get the data steward involved, they are involved in all of these different areas. Okay, I see Wesley, your hand's up.
Yeah, two questions. I think you've kind of moved on from the, but so my question was around the role of the business as usual and the project
Yes.
data steward. So I've got a client that, you know, just trying to do data governance and stewardship within a project, and obviously this needs to be a more enterprise approach, and there is a level of enterprise work happening, but there was a conversation that came up around having stewards or data people within a project working in parallel with a BAU sort of stewardship team. Is that something that is common, or is that a recommended approach, or does anyone maybe have some thoughts, or is it something maybe we can spend a little bit of time on afterwards? That was my one question, and the other question was just comment-in question was the training. When I look at training, and it's the policies, training in the policies, and training on actual data management, how to do it. I think obviously the template side of it is something that is or has been a little bit of an issue to kind of develop as you go, and obviously what this project, I understand, tries to achieve is to try and. My question is would this templates potentially, or examples potentially, be available when the project is finished eventually?
Yeah. So Wesley, what we are looking to do is find out how we would share the templates after the project is done. And what we are looking to do is to say, well, if different people are contributing, then there will be an automatic availability of certain templates. Okay. Paul's busy working on that now to say, well, if you produce two templates for data quality, then you have access to the data quality templates, or data governance, or whatever it is that you're working on. There'll be that ability to have access to those templates. So that's the one thing. Okay. Then the other question that you were asking in terms of building the team. Okay. Now I just want to check that I understood your question correctly. In terms of having these different roles on the team, the different data steward roles on the team whilst the project was operational, or as part of the SDLC. Is that the question that you were asking, just to confirm that?
Yeah, so essentially you have a BAU data governance team.
Yes.
So I would probably like them to the operational team in a sense, and then a project team. And would they collaborate horizontally, or how does that work in practice?
Let me just explain here. So here I've got operational data management, or BAU, and that's what I refer to as my first line of defense. And then we talk about producing data stewards and consuming data stewards. Those data stewards, when we talk about producing, they are the people that would monitor how people capture the data and how we bring data into the system and how we can improve the process or whatever it is to get better quality data coming in, right? So those are operational people. And then we've also got consuming data stewards that look at the BI reports and to be able to read the data and understand and make sure that the data is correct. And then the next level that I refer to is what we call defining data. Okay, that's executing and being part of building the data artifacts as part of the project. Okay, and here we see they can come in different areas. They can supply inputs. Okay, they can produce inputs, artifacts, and they can consume artifacts. Okay, so for example, if I'm building if I'm building as a data steward, if I'm building a conceptual model, okay, can I read the business glossary? Can I pick up the business definitions? So that's for me to do my work, I need certain inputs. Okay, so I need to be able to understand what those inputs are saying to me, and I can use them in the production of my current artifact. So these are the people. Now, what you'll find, Wesley, these are what we refer to as sometimes project data stewards. Once they've done the work, they can go back into operational, and then the system or whatever was developed, either it's the data warehouse, they would be able to explain and help the consuming data stewards a lot more to understand that data. Does that answer your question?
That makes sense. From a best practice perspective, would it be a good idea if I had a client that says, okay, I want to start this capability, for instance, managing quality within a project, and after the project it becomes BAU, and that becomes your operational data stewardship. Is that an approach?
Yes,
that makes
yes,
sense?
certainly. So sometimes it's actually very helpful to train your data stewards as part of the project. So if we think about it, if you start a data quality one, they would help us set up or define the critical data elements. They would then we would teach them how to do a data quality expectation, which defines the data quality rules. And then, this is the first project execution. Now, when we've finished and they've learned from that, they can then go and start defining other critical data elements for other data sets that they're working on. Okay.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Makes sense.
So certainly it's very helpful to use those type of people to be part of a project, and then they can take those skills back with them, and part of the operationalized data product, they would be responsible then for improving those definitions and constantly managing the data quality expectations. Okay. All right. So what I wanted to just finish off at the end here was, so that's what we see, that we need to be able to educate our people to be able to understand how to do it, to provide us with the inputs. And then these are the different deliverables that we're referring to. We've shown you those. And then I wanted to just go to the next step, is to say, this is what we refer to as our case study, where we would take a use case and they would go from the definition of the use case all the way to the execution of it. And then we would have a retro coming back, and they would be really responsible for being able to understand on each step of the use case what was needed to be delivered, how did they provide it, how did they produce inputs, how did they create the different artifacts, and then how did they consume the artifacts. So that's the help that we can do in terms of providing them with this practical training so that they can understand what needs to be done. Okay. And then just the last step in terms of how would these people then get involved in defining a automation or getting involved in an automation. Of course, they are there to help with the definition of a reference architecture. What are the business requirements for the technology? What are the business requirements for DII, that latency? They're there to help it, and they would have to explain why we get business value out of reducing the latency. Then some of the feature weighting, and then also the technology assessment. So they would help us define and assess the technology as to whether this benefits them, whether this Calibra is doing it better than Informatica or whichever tool that you're using. They would be part of that assessment. I think that's quite an important thing where we get them involved in helping us make a decision. Okay, so that's what we've done for week 1 with our managers, and then week 2, and then I'll pause there. We've gone a little bit over time. Cheers, Mark. Any questions or comments? Nothing. All right. Any comments from you, Paul?
No, thanks very much, Howard. I know that it's going to be most valuable, especially during training and like tomorrow's engagement. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity to get stuck into the DG. I know that Andrea Johannes also just waiting for her subject that she'd like to contribute toward. So I'll chase her up. I looked for her on the call. She's not there today, but okay. I'll chase her up. And but thanks so much, Howard.
Fantastic. All righty. Thanks, everybody. Are there any other questions before we go?
No, just thank you, Howard. I think it's very valuable and very relevant for my role and work that I'm doing. So thanks. It was great joining the session.
Excellent. Yep. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.